Heartstopper is a dream come true for anyone who is tired of watching queer teens go through utter hell, with the only benefit of all that they go through being that they have tougher skin at the end. To summarize season one, Charlie is the lead character and he's someone who just barely has been forced out of the closet. And no sooner than he gets forced out, he's bullied, and then one of his older classmates named Ben, he decides he's going to manipulate Charlie and kind of feed off of his insecurities to use Charlie in order to explore his own sexuality. But as opposed to Nick, who we'll talk about in a second, Ben stays very much on the down low, doesn't really acknowledge Charlie outside of their makeout sessions, and even during those private sessions between each other, while Charlie kind of tries to take what he can get from it, it's very clear that Ben has no real desires to love and appreciate Charlie as he deserves. But that's opposed to Nick, who, from the start, everybody pushes the idea that Nick is very much straight because, he's masculine, he's the king of rugby, so why would he possibly have any type of feelings towards Charlie, who's this skinny nerd who's very fast, plays drums, and has very cool character traits, but at the same time, it's kind of a mismatch. But as we see, Nick is kind of in that process where, sort of like Ben, he's unsure of himself, but unlike Ben, he's willing to explore what Charlie and him can be. And Charlie gets to actually show the type of patience and the type of, dare I say, love that some people who are already out have to show people who aren't at that point yet. But I should note, it's not just about Charlie and Nick and their love affair. It mainly is, but it's not just about them. The show also talks. The show also has Charlie's friend named Isaac, who I don't even know why I mentioned him because the show barely talks about him, but we'll get into that in a minute. And we also have Charlie's friend Tao and also Charlie's friend Elle. Elle and Tao are a could be, should be this season, but unfortunately gets pushed off to the next season, it seems. But as individuals, Tao is somebody who has some deeply rooted abandonment issues that isn't dived into. And Elle is someone who, like Charlie, is part of the LGBTQ plus community, but she is trans. And in fact, she used to go to the all boys school that Tao, Isaac, and Charlie, alongside Isaac, alongside Nick and Ben, went to. But within the last term, she has now gone to the Higgs School, which is the sister school of the Truman School that all the boys go to. Over there, she meets Tara and Darcy, who is one of the few lesbian couples in that school. And at first, Elle is faking the funk in terms of things being so much better now that she's not being bullied like Charlie was last year, but she's rather lonely until Tara decides to talk to her and form a friendship. And it's through Tara and Darcy, who are also kind of dealing with the situation that Charlie is with Nick in terms of figuring a way to go from having private, cute moments to actually being out in the open and having PDA, that we see what you can say is the male version of it and then the female version of it when it comes to one side being out and the other side being closeted, and the process of not just coming out in terms of making a proclamation that you're gay, but also the little things when people start changing around you and how they react to you. The first highlight for us will be Charlie, and that's mainly because Charlie feels, or rather is, the type of character who I feel like he's not just written to be relatable, but physically, the way he talks, looks, everything about him feels like someone you're not supposed to have a disconnect from. Like, just for example, the lack of perfection in terms of the actor who plays Charlie's missing a tooth. They have it where he has a bit of a unibrow going, but not a full unibrow, but it's not the kind that makes you feel like, pluck a few things and then he's a Adonis. It allows you to, and granted, I'm saying this when I'm so far away from being a teenager, but it gives you this vibe that this person is someone you're supposed to relate to, not someone who's supposed to be put up on a pedestal and you just hope and idolize that you can one day have a life like them. Charlie's very much rooted in reality to me. And with that, he it makes it so you really invest in his journey and appreciate how this show writes out his journey. Especially because, just to add on to it, when it comes to him attracting Nick, you can see that Charlie's not one of those types who, just because he's a lead, that's why he's getting this attractive boy. Rather, it's because Charlie is this really nice person who internalizes a lot and may apologize a lot, but that's because he really appreciates people who are in his life and doesn't want to push them away, scare them off, or what have you. On top of that, he's someone who, even though we don't get to see it too much in this show, he's someone that will sacrifice for his friends if he needs to. And I would say, outside of Imogen, who's kind of like the straight female version of him, there's no one else who really gives you that charisma that has you understand that this person has so much going for them, even if a lot of people just don't realize it. Now, the second highlight is something that's a little bit complicated to explain, but what I like about this show, is that it has a good mix of being realistic in terms of showing that homophobia, even when it comes to late stage millennials or Gen Z, it still exists, alongside not getting too dark and traumatic. For example, when it comes to some of the negative stuff that we see that Charlie gets bullied by a boy named Harry, who's one of Nick's friends. We see Ben try to manipulate him and kind of prey on him, if you really think about it. And you could also add in that there's Tara and dealing with how people make the assumption that she couldn't be gay because of how she looks, or even, as we mentioned earlier with Nick, the idea that just because someone's masculine means they can't be gay. They have to look something like Charlie in order for them to fit into some kind of bubble. But let's go to a little lighter note. On a lighter note, there's also characters like Darcy, who's Tara's girlfriend, who show you why it's so beautiful and important to either find your community or create one yourself, because that's what allows characters like Nick to start really getting comfortable with who they are when they're able to speak out loud that they're potentially gay, bisexual, or just questioning at the time. And I would even add one more thing to that, is the character known as Mr. Ajayi. And while we don't see a lot of him this season, at the same time, having a teacher who understands someone who is significantly older but is not trying to prey on you or anything like that, but rather he wants to just simply be there or just make himself available because he's been through what you've been through, it really gives you like this perfect balance of, this is realistically what could happen to you that's gonna suck, but at the same time, if you find the right people, the right community, if you unfortunately sometimes just persevere, there is the potential that it can get better. Piggybacking off of the last two topics, the first highlight and last highlight is just what is done with the two central relationships. When it comes to Charlie and Nick alongside Tara and Darcy, it really helps push forward what this show wants to be about. It wants to show you that whether you are a Darcy type who has seemingly been out, proud of it, out loud, or you're a Charlie type who's a bit more subdued about it, you can find your person. Yes, it might be hard, especially because they may not have matured or else been forced out or even know who they are like you do, but there is a possibility that you can find that person and not have to wait till you're a full-on adult, college, but you can find them in high school. And speaking first just about Nick and Charlie, you have to appreciate that you kind of get a two-sided thing. It's almost like how in murder mysteries and all that, they kind of show you the signs so that in real life you can kind of see that's a red flag. In a way, when it comes to Nick, especially compared to Ben, you can see what's a red flag and what deserves grace. Ben's actions, from not talking to Charlie in the hallways to finding a girlfriend and still trying to keep Charlie a secret, that's a red flag. But when it comes to Nick, he still was Charlie's friend even when they wasn't kissing, other they weren't hanging out in his house or having like private moments. There was still a sign that Nick might not have been ready, but at the very least he knew how to be respectful and still show that no matter what, he's gonna be Charlie's friend. And that is the goal when you look for somebody who is either down low, questioning, or just simply not ready. And switching to Tara and Darcy, you can see why the process of coming out can be difficult. Yes, when you're somebody like Tara who kind of fits that mold that Nick does when it comes to, not seeming like you would be gay, it can be complicated to go from the assumption of being straight to being an out lesbian, bisexual, whatever. And I think the purpose of seeing their relationship is understanding perhaps what can be seen as the worst case scenario. Because with Charlie and Nick, we don't really see that much. But with Tara and Darcy, I don't want to say it's full force, but it's definitely presented as it can be. Whether it's social media posts when it talks about it, people with snide little comments, and just recognizing that, yes, it's going to be difficult at times, definitely annoying, but at the same time, those people with their little nonsense is not what should be your focus. What should be your focus is on the things that make you happy, including this person who is the reason why you feel the need to speak out loud, because just being in private and having these moments is not enough. You need to have PDA. You need to be able to grab their hand at the movie theater without worrying about somebody finding out, or even kissing them at a party, because you guys are sharing a moment that will last longer than your relationship, but at the same time it represents the height of where you are in life at that time. And honestly, just watching both of the journeys are just so beautiful, and especially once they start claiming each other publicly, and it just, I don't know what to say. I feel like, as someone who watches a lot of media which focuses on LGBT themes, whether we're talking about big stuff like Pose or we're talking about indie movies and shows, it's nice to get something that recognizes that you can't always have this ideal relationship or ideal situation, but at the same time, it doesn't want to make it seem like you're going to have to suffer a long time before you get to any semblance of joy. The only low point for us when it comes to Heartstopper is it doesn't really like adding in the finer details so that you can get the full picture. Like, just to name a few things, Charlie tells us that someone outed him, but we don't find out who that is. It's made very clear that Tao has abandonment issues, but whether that's because his father isn't around, whether it's because he grew up without having friends or anything, because a lot of the time when we're told when people meet, it's like year 7, year 8. It's never like elementary school or something like that. So with hearing that, it kind of makes you wonder, is he just used to being alone, and now that he has friends, he's very much scared to lose them? And I would even go, when it comes to Charlie, the way that it seems, Ben took advantage of an issue that was already there. So what caused Charlie to be so insecure and think that he's such a bother to people is definitely something I was left wondering. Never mind when you consider that we meet Tao's mother. We met Charlie's mom, I think, on like one episode, and we met his dad many times. We met Nick's mom. Where's Elle's parents? She's one of the main people we see, yet we don't get to see her home, I don't think. No, we get small shots of her room, but we don't get to see how she lives, who she lives with. It's just little bits and pieces in a weird way. And heck, even when it comes to Ben, I get that this show doesn't necessarily want to be the one that tries to humanize this villain, but a part of me does wonder, when it comes to him acting the way he does, is it purely because he saw what happened to Charlie or maybe another student like Elle, and that's why he wants to be closeted this way? Is it something that's going on in his household? Or heck, even with Harry, why is he such a bully to everybody? Is it simply because he's rich and that's his character? He has to be an ass because he's a rich kid? A lot of things just aren't gone into, and it's almost like it's touched upon, but at the same time, it's like the writer, the director, everybody was just like, we don't have the time to do this season. We could push that off to next season. We'll just drop bits and pieces so that you have these questions and know that we are kind of thinking about it. But wait, we're trying to build the whole foundation here. We'll work on level 1, 2, 3 next season. Speaking of working on things for the next season, Tao and Elle unfortunately are pushed off to season 2. And that's despite us seeing Tara and Darcy's journey, Nick and Charlie's journey, and definitely feeling that Tao and Elle could have matched their stride. But, and maybe this is just me being optimistic, I think when it comes to Tao and Elle, they recognize that's something a little bit more complicated than 2 boys and 2 girls. When it comes to Tao and Elle, they have to address the fact that Elle is a trans woman, and Tao, we're not really let in to know what Tao's sexuality is, but, and maybe this is just me remembering all the kind of stuff that we saw in Pose, but there's kind of the reconciliation that has to be between recognizing your friend identifies as a girl, you treat them as a girl, yet at the same time, there's going to come a point where when you two decide you want to get really intimate, and not just in terms of deep conversations, hand holding and kissing, but go to sex, you have to understand that certain things, clearly I don't know how to say this properly because it's very much a touchy topic, but I do think it's one of those things that needs to be explored, because as we start learning that people identify by various genders and both men and women get to open up about their sexuality, so comes the complication of where sexuality and gender meet. And I feel that Elle and Tao are 2 characters that definitely can help explore that topic, and based off of how this show is, explore what it means in a way that hopefully is respectful, yet also, as we've seen thus far, very much honest. So the last on the fence topic is just how some supporting characters are treated. Now, when it comes to this show, if you're not in a relationship with somebody who's a lead, you're kind of set off to the side. Now, for some characters, it's so bad that it's like you don't really get to know them at all. Isaac, for example, despite him being part of Charlie's friend group, pretty much he may have a line here and there, but otherwise he's usually with his face in the book, or seemingly he doesn't really want to be bothered with anybody. Following that, you also have Mr. Ajayi, who clearly played a major part in Charlie's life when it comes to having lunch with him when he was getting bullied, and seemingly he did the same for Elle when she was having issues. Yet, outside of learning that he is likely the art teacher and he's gay, that's pretty much the summary of his character. Though, in his defense, or just to kind of downplay that issue, it isn't like this show really tries to dive too deep into any adults' lives or who they are. I mean, in the last episode, we get introduced to the headmaster, mainly for an intercom, and he seems hilarious, yet I don't think we see the man's face once. But setting aside the adults, I would like to push forward Tori, who is Charlie's older sister, who is very weird. I mean, complete sweetheart. Made me cry when she was consoling Charlie in the last episode. But at the same time, it's like, why is she always with a cup in hand, sipping something from a straw? Why is she just popping up like she's supposed to be part of that Wednesday Addams Club? Like, there's something there that's like, you keep pushing reasons that I should be intrigued by this character, but you're not really giving me what I want. And again, it feels like we said with the low point, that we're giving sprinkles and reasons to want to stick around and clamor for a second season. But it's like, with what we get thus far, it makes it so that the season finale feels more so like a mid-season finale, and that we're missing so many details. To the point it gets rather frustrating at certain points. Not to the point of you not liking the show, but definitely feeling like you're being teased more than given what you really need. And I almost forgot, I'm going to throw Imogen in there just because, as I think I might have said before, Imogen is basically the female straight version of Charlie. She's someone who has her own imperfections, yet at the same time, she seems perfect for you to relate to and look up to, and perhaps you can easily even see yourself as. And with that, her situation with Nick, and once that kind of goes the way it does, and then she kind of disappears, it's just like, why? Why are we just going to toss away this character who has so much value just because she's not dating this person? And maybe it's not right to say that they toss these characters aside, but it definitely feels that some people will use just in order to further along the story rather than there being a true commitment to developing that character and making them fulfill their potential. So overall, our rating is a bit mixed in terms of you should stick around to watch this, but just realize, like a lot of freshman series, it's a little bit rough in some areas. It's trying to focus mainly on its selling points in terms of let's show you realistic but still hopeful queer relationships. Let's have it where we're not trying to downplay the seriousness of what it means to be out when you're in high school, yet at the same time, let's not make this nothing but stuff to traumatize you to go deeper into the closet and perhaps not be your 100% true self until you're in college, until you're adult, or if it's really bad, perhaps after you've been in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex just to keep the peace or keep quiet or not to have to deal with everything that initially is going to be difficult, but at the end of the day, at the end of the week, month, or year, eventually you would see, for lack of a better way of putting it, the rainbow after the storm. And while we have to admit that this show has a lot of beautiful things going for it, again, it's working out the kinks. It has good lead characters and a slew of good supporting ones, but it doesn't know what to do with them. And with this show being only a half hour, it also doesn't have the time to do something with them. So when it comes to Heartstopper, if you have a Netflix account, it's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're into or interested in LGBT plus media, or even if you're not, it has good quality romances that definitely can make you swoon, and also a few sad moments that if you're an emotional dude like me, it may make you tear up a little bit. You know, one of those Denzel and Glory tears down your face.